Welcome to the New World Order Showcase Podcast. Your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist. Couldn't be more excited to have you join us today. On this podcast, we celebrate the champions of change, the up-and-coming life, health and transformational coaches who are fearlessly stepping forward to make a difference in the world. Get ready for inspiring stories, practical tips, and powerful moments that will motivate you to make a positive change in your life and those around you. We're happy to have you join us on this incredible journey as we dive into the world of life, health, and transformational coaches who are lighting up the path towards a better tomorrow.
Hi, and welcome to the New World Order Showcase podcast. I'm your host, Jill Hart, and with me today is Michael O'Connor. Michael's a humanistic astrologer, and he offers life coaching as part of his astrology packages. Michael helps people become more clearly and consciously aware of their true nature, authentic destiny, and timing. Welcome to the show, Michael. We were talking about the reality. We started recording, and I just wanted to get this kind of on. And we were also talking about cycles in astrology. We were talking about mainly about the Great American Eclipse, which happened April 8th, and how it was an eclipse, but it's part of a larger cycle of eclipses and different things that intersect. Astrology isn't so much about predicting the future for you or telling you, what's going to happen today, which a lot of us, we like to look at our horoscope and say, okay, so today's going to be a good day or today's going to be a not so good day. But astrology is so much more than that. And that's why I love chatting with Michael about these things. So
thank you, Jill. Lovely to be here and lovely to see you. Yeah, it truly is. Everything in existence is in motion, and that motion is cyclic from the molecular to the cosmic. And every cycle can be seen to have an anatomy. It has a fundamental anatomy, like an archetypal anatomy. I mean, there's a base, like a fundamental way, not to say that the one we have is absolute, but the division of the 360-degree circle, which is symbolic of the cycle, is very tightly divided into quarters, at least 4 times 90, right, equals 360, but then into eighths. So you get these 45-degree segments, and that's the basic gist of it. And within that, you get the waxing half and then the waning half, and you can see how seasons are in there, and the very cycle of a day from 6 a.m. to 12 noon to 6 p.m. to 12 midnight. There's your cardinal points. And so it's all parallel principles, north, south, east, west, winter, spring, summer, fall, 6 a.m. to 12 noon, 6 p.m. to 12 midnight. And it goes from there even further. So you see these wonderful parallel principles. So yeah, cycles, and astrology is all about that. All about that.
and intersecting cycles, like we can talk about eclipses, and they intersect with things. Nothing is just like, we don't just look at one star and say, okay, that's it. We look at groups of stars and how they interact with the planets, and how the planets interact with the eclipses, and where we are going around the sun. And I just...
Precisely, yes. Yeah, when we get into the overlapping cycle principle, and there's sort of an endeavor to achieve a generic perspective on the cycles, which is valid. Like the biggest one, generally speaking, for all intents and purposes, is the ages, like the 20, based on what's called the precessional cycle, which is calculated to be 25,910 years long. So that's, for all intents and purposes, once again, is the foundational cycle. Although there's larger cycles, we all know that, and you can weave those in and go crazy, but you need not, because it's just too vast a time period. Why bother go further? It doesn't help us knowing that the galaxies are, Andromeda is going to be closer to us in 5 billion years. It's not, but there's that kind of stuff out there. You're like, are we paying for this?
Right.
But when you divide the precessional cycle into ages, so you get this age of Aquarius thing, age of Pisces thing, and then you get these tidy little 2160-year periods. Once you get into that, now, okay, you can start to see the context of history more closely. So yeah, so that's the bigger picture. So within the 2160-year period, then you could also subdivide that. So each, and then within that subdivision, you get into that contextual perspective where the fairly large other cycles are. Like, for example, Neptune and Pluto. Generally, there's other further planets, but basically in current mainstream Western astrology, Pluto's the furthest out by and large, although it has a highly elliptical orbit, and Neptune's further out sometimes. Okay, but those two planets have a very tidy 504-year cycle. So that's a big amount of time, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay, so you have these 2160-year cycle. You can divide that by 12, which creates this, it goes on like that, on and on and on, division, 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 division. So you're kind of like zeroing in, zoom, 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 until you get, it's like the planet, you zoom into a city. Then there's a lot going on in any city, right? So so you get this 2160, then you get this 504, then say Uranus and Pluto is about 140-year cycle. So it goes quickly, very smaller, right? It jumps, boom. Okay, and then you get into others like Uranus, Neptune, and I can't remember exactly what that one is. It's about 135. So you get these things. Now, these are okay, I know it goes on and on, it gets a bit long-winded, I'm sorry. These are generic. Okay, this is the general, but the specific, what I mean by that, when I say generic, I mean every person has their own reality. The paradox of life is that each and every one of us are the center of the universe as far as our experience goes. And so also the notion of a person extends to a country. Every country has that, we are the center kind of thing. And then every state, every province, every city, every organization, every company, every hockey team, everything. So that's where astrology that's why we say we can talk about the generic, but every case on its own ground. So what people like who are more beginner like, well, it's not only that, but they'll grab the generic and then go, this is what's going to happen. But you can't do that really, because it goes to who, to what. So it kind of creates a bit of a never-ending story. So we can talk about the generic, but we always have to relate it to some subject, right? A person like the United States, for example, which gets pretty big, a country, right? Because there's lots of different folks in different strokes all over one country, especially the United States, probably in the world's biggest of all. The biggest cosmopolitan country on the planet, I would generally say. Not that I know strictly, but Canada's catching up, but we're 1/10 the population. Right? So
Wow.
yeah, so United States has the big population, and very right from the get-go, right? diversity and multiculturalism and cosmopolitan, and that's a big responsibility almost to shoulder. And it's been tough. It's a tough go, right? It's been a tough thing for the United States with Civil War and you know, all that. War of Independence was the beginning, but the Civil War in particular, when it was, you know, neighbor against neighbor, oh boy. So, and not every country undergoes that kind of initiation, shall we call it, you know, like it's a brutal thing,
Or
right?
stays together.
Hmm?
Or stays together.
Or stays together. Oh yeah, all that. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a the story of the United States is worth talking about. I know you're American, I'm Canadian, but the story of the United States is worth talking about because it's a very important country on the planet in terms of being the symbol of democracy and freedom still. And, you know, but it's now struggling, sadly. But the astrology of the United States really shows that it would be. And that's a really interesting thing. This is where you get into what I call horizontal logic. That's the dominoes falling. So this happened because that happened and the other thing happened, and it all makes logical sense. And I have no argument with that. It's true. But there's a vertical logic. Vertical logic is where it gets far more interesting. Where a horizontal logic is chronological, like chronos, time. Vertical logic is synchronistic. Now you enter a different paradigm of thinking. Now you get into words like destiny, that there's like a larger plan. You know, we get into that kind of conversation that the universe is conscious, existence is on purpose. There's a plan. And then it gets much more interesting as far as I'm concerned, you know. It's not a quick, well, as a matter of fact, it's a never-ending conversation, really, the plan, because it engages everybody's destiny from countries to individuals. And you could even say humanity as a whole, but that's and you can, like, in other words, humanity as a whole, basically, I would say is we're souls incarnate in the Earth school. That's the way I would describe it. And so there's a plan, and that we evolve very specifically, we as humans, very specifically on this planet. I'm kind of an advocate for, no, I don't think you come from another planet, really, because then you have to come from another star. And then it gets into a kind of I can't be sure, but I have a sort of a biased leaning to no, we come from this star. And that's a kind of an interesting kind of conversation. I won't get lost in this, but I want to tell you this very interesting thought on that very quickly. We could not exist around another star. All this thing of Star Wars and all that, Star Trek. Every star has a different molecular structure. Its radiation field is slightly different. There's no way we could exist on another planet. There's no way we could exist around another star. The only way we could ever do that is if we were in a much different dimensional state, but they were not in this dimensional state. No way. So I like Star Trek a lot because it's mind bending, right? Mind expanding. They play on very human realities juxtaposed to those dynamics that are going on. But it's a fantasy. We couldn't even travel outside our solar system, by the way. It's like there's like
I'm not
the
even
solar
certain
system.
we can travel outside of our atmosphere.
No,
Personally.
yeah. The atmosphere of the Earth has like a membrane around it, right? Exactly. And so does the solar system. So the only way we could ever travel in space, not to mention the fact it's humongous, to beyond all comprehension. We don't have any idea what that means. Like, it's like walk 100 miles. You don't know what 100 miles is exactly unless you walked it, kind of thing. So, like, just to say, you know, it's kind of, we imagine things, right? We kind of guess we imagineer our way around things. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good. Intuition, why do we need to know all those things? But yeah, like, you know, I always like to impress this upon people. Like Pluto is like the speed of light from the sun for 8 hours, and the solar system itself is 24 hours. That at the speed of light, that's the expand in a very 360-degree spherical expansion, right? That's the radiation field of the sun. But the closest star is 4.22 light years away. That gets very exciting, because it would, if based on current propulsion for a human being to be sent to Pluto, from what I heard last, but I'm not sure anymore, it was 45 years. Okay, so it would take us over 100 years to get to the edge of the solar system. And guess what? We wouldn't be able to get out of it because it's got a field. So we're getting off track a little bit, but it's kind of fun to mind bend a little bit. It creates a bit of context. So the only way we could get out is if we were able to travel through portals, like a interdimensional. So to me, there's no such thing as aliens traveling through space. No, if there's aliens, they're interdimensionally able to get here, which means they must
Stargates.
Stargates. They must be vibrating at a different frequency. It's not just technology. I don't like, it's not enough to go, oh, we invented this. No, I don't think so. I think that if you don't have that vibration, but it's fun to imagine that we could. I don't want to knock that.
It's not, I don't think that it's that we can't. It's that, and I don't necessarily think it's that we don't, because it's very possible that this does exist. Oftentimes Hollywood will present things that are actually going on, but they're so fantastic. Most people say, oh, that's just television.
Sure. It's not, I agree with you. That I bow out. I do not wish to present that I know that, no, we're not doing that. No, I don't. And multidimensionality is just frequencies and vibration, frequencies of vibration. So, you know, yeah, it's good to keep an open mind about such things. Indeed, indeed. I will offer this though, that the planet itself is multidimensional. We are, all of us, multidimensional. Everything in the manifest universe is multidimensional, invariably has layers of dimensions. The very fabric of space is dimensional, not on one hand in the mathematical sense, 11 dimensions, which is really kind of exciting branch of mathematics, but that's physics, kind of mathematics, physics, I think. If I have mathematics at least, and physics gets in there, but there's another metaphysical dimensional perspective, right? But the point I want to make is that we already live on a multi-dimension. Like, what I mean is, if you go to different places, even in any city, it's like you're entering different vibrational frequencies. Like going to any different homes. So that people are living in different dimensions right here, right now, even though they intersect. But there's a saying, there's many circles of people out there who you will never intersect with. And that's kind of a little bit of a mind bender itself. You could, but you won't. Kind of funny to say that. Like, that would be certainly true in economic classes.
And we're not that far apart, 6 degrees of separation or 8 degrees, whatever that is.
That kind of thing. Yeah. If I understand what you're saying correctly. Yeah, no, there's ways we could. It's the paradox is we could engage, but we won't and don't. And because it gets back to plan and destiny, because life's relatively short. So you're there's this wonderful notion of, why are you engaging with the people you are? It's kind of precious, really, although we all evolve one another, so in other words, we get into relationships, we get into breakups, divorces, and things happen. It's like, yikes. But out of all the billions and billions, you're interacting with them, like you and I right now. The odds are very, very high that we wouldn't. So you kind of go, wow, that's a big odds, what's kind of, that. So when you think that way, it kind of, well, it makes it a little bit more special, perhaps, taking people in situations for granted, although we tend to, but you know what I mean? It's a kind of pinch me, I'm here. And I'll do my best to be respectful and hopefully relate in a harmonious way, and both of us coming away happy, right?
Yeah. And with the internet, you have the ability to interact with more people and touch more people's lives and have them touch yours in a way that hasn't existed that we know of on this planet in the past.
It's a real leveling of the playing field of the opportunity to share thoughts and ideas. And I do, it's a very important aspect of the Aquarian age. Where it will go in the future, I do not know. But as it is, indeed, you are right. And it's a privilege indeed to be able to, we can get frustrated about this and that, but wow, we live in a privileged time. Unprecedented.
It's totally unprecedented. And when you look back at the Piscean age, where people traveled in schools, in communities, and then you're moving into the Aquarian age, which is much more fluid. It's kind of, to me,
fluid, maybe. I'd like to think there's truth in that, but I think that it could be, that's fair enough statement. I wouldn't usually, because Aquarius is an air sign, but yes, I think it's a fair thing to say that
like the wind.
More, it carries on the wind a little lighter, so that's a nice way of looking at it for sure. The age of I've done quite some studies on this, and the actual, I might have mentioned it to you last time, the actual dawn moment of the age of Aquarius is yet to occur, and I believe it's at the end of this decade. That's when the actual, like if you were looking on the horizon, that moment when the sun goes, but we're still ironically in the pre of that. So that's where we are right now. This next handful of years is very significant, every day is significant, but in that sort of perspective. And that's where we come back in a manner to the United States, which, according to its astrology, is going through a lot. So you see, the horizontal perspective is very valid and warranted and fine and good, but the vertical, the synchronistic is like, no kidding, no wonder it's going through so much. It's like there's a convergence of huge events. Like if astrologically, if I was doing it with an individual, I would go, oh my God, your life is, your life is changing in a big way. Like, talk about relocating to another country and marrying somebody foreign and adopting all their kids and starting a new career kind of thing.
Learning a different language and all of it.
Yeah. That would be a big, like, oh my God, are you like fasten your seatbelt? So the United States, for example, is in astrology, one of the more larger cycles for individuals is called the progressed moon. It's a 29.5-year cycle. Well, get this, the United States just had their progressed moon, the most recent one, on March 25th, 2024. So it's like you're like in a whole new, every time there's a progressed moon, it's a very powerful thing. It's no small thing. It's big. And the beginning of it is kind of difficult often. There's a sort of bit of euphoria in it, but it's kind of tends to be, I have to admit, it's not necessarily absolutely, but other factors have to, it depends on a lot of factors, admittedly, whether it will be difficult, but can be. There's a few other factors. I was looking at what was called the Saturn, the United States Saturn return. And I'm just going to look at that very quickly and just remind myself what I'm talking about. I was like, whoa, okay.
While you're doing that, I want to remind the audience that you created an article or post about the Great American Eclipse, and I will link to it in the show notes. It is a fascinating read about the cycles of this eclipse that we went through as a country for the United States, but really it impacts the whole world.
Yeah.
Because right now, as goes the United States, so goes the world.
It
And
does. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, when you want to look at any event, it's important, in my view, to look at it in layers, like you said, like we're talking about, in cyclic layers to get the deeper story. A more kind of superficial approach to astrology is the transit event thing, like an eclipse. A solar eclipse is kind of a transiting event thing. So it's kind of like a fireworks sort of moment, and it's relevant enough. It's like a sort of a massive acupressure point that was pressed. So it's definitely playing a role, and it wouldn't want to idly dismiss that. In the United States chart, yeah, it had a very I didn't over elaborate in any kind of conclusive way, but yeah, its impact was very hitting home in a very strong way. Really hit at the roots of the country, and but the other thing, just quickly here, it comes in context to what was the Saturn return. The most recent Saturn return for the United States was back in 2011. And that was a very powerful one. So it's a bit too much. We're not going to talk about that too much, but it's just that it's a contextual background. And if in a scholarly sort of way, one might look at that and what it showed that the United States would, when you think back to 2011, you think that, what happened? Can we remember? Remember there was Occupy Wall Street? That was 2011. That's a good example. That was the beginning of sort of a type of underground, if you like, I suspect. A kind of there's something like goes further back. We can go to 9/11, there's something going on here that's a little disturbing. But then Occupy Wall Street was, hey, and a big, so it's at
a
work.
peeling back of what's happening.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an exposure. I think 9/11 was the same way. It was an exposure of stuff that's going on. You're being shown a production. Everybody wants you in power, wants you to watch the production. They want you to be the audience, but they want you to participate in certain ways. And then that kind of dies off, but the memory is still there at the audience. And then the next time something comes up, they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And then they kind of fade back. And then
they have a kind of a seed event, I think, impact, especially when you think cycles, because cycles have durations. So the bigger aspect of a cycle, like a solar eclipse, is what's called a conjunction. So the sun and moon conjunct. So conjunctions are the beginning of a whole new cycle. So it's a more scholarly level and mature, shall we say, level of astrology for astrologers to follow all of these many overlapping cycles. So yeah, they don't generally get paid for it unless they happen to be hired by some intelligence agency that respects that astrology can offer information. I'm sure they do. So there must be some, fairly, astute, knowledgeable astrologers who are scholarly types, in think tanks. But I say that humbly because I'm not sure. But other than
You look at
that,
the three wise men from the Bible. That's exactly who they were.
yeah, they definitely had that. You mean the Mesopotamians in ancient times, the Indian, like India, the Middle East, Mesopotamia, and Egypt, of course, and eventually Greece, and certainly at the time of Jesus, yeah, that's why they were very, very deeply immersed in astrology, as you say. It was their science, really. It was their science. So they did establish the foundation of astronomy, of course, as the means of the astrology. They didn't care as much. Well, no, even then there were those among them that were more interested in the astronomy than the astrology, right? The more statistical types or whatever, versus the more interpretive, prophetic types, and so on and so forth. But yes, I appreciate what you're saying. Yes, indeed, the three wise men symbolize from the Middle East, Mesopotamia, because the camels, right?
Right.
And the incense and myrrh and all that type of thing, somewhere in Persia or something. And they had the wherewithal to appreciate that multiple conjunction, which, I did some studies on it and was convinced enough by this particular author. Interestingly enough, he felt that it occurred, according to his studies, in 7 AD. And it was during, and he gave that Jesus was a Pisces, which made sense to me. And so the conjunction occurred in March, he said. But I've heard people say different things, so I did study that, and it was interesting years ago, but I didn't get too much into it. And it's simply because for practical purposes, you don't get paid for that kind of stuff. You got to make a living, and that's where my goal to keep like, although I'm quite scholarly, not as much as some for sure, but I do have that inclination. But more immediately, I'm a coach, counselor type. So keeping it relevant for individuals is not exactly sensational, but it's relevant, right?
Having been as a member of your community for, gosh, it's been a while now, and I always look forward to Fridays when the next week's episode appears. You give not just like the weekly thing, you give a monthly picture of what's happening in the broader realm of what we're all experiencing. There's like this, you were talking about the generic cycles. We all, as a community in a time zone or a time period, not a time zone, but a time period, we experience some things collectively based on when we were born. But because some of these cycles are so large, like 500 years, there's going to be whole groups of people that travel through it and are affected by what's happening. And then they're affected by other things that are kind of layered on top of it. But the way that you present the information allows people to look at the big picture and then get a little bit of a synopsis of their own personal sun sign. And if you know what your moon sign is, you can kind of synthesize the two of them together to get a bigger picture of how things are kind of flowing for you during that period of time. So you can work with the frequencies that are happening for you, or you could end up, pushing against something, seeing how that goes for you.
Thank you for that. Yes, thanks. The horoscope's a gimme. I give, here, I'm going to interpret it for you. And yes, I endeavor to present it as an inspiration of how you can harness it. That's my interest. I don't want to present it as an outcome, more as a trend.
Right.
And then, hey, give the reader that little opportunity to make practical use of it. Yes, indeed. I want to bring attention to them, quite frankly, as opposed to me. I want to, to give to that as, opposed to making these big fancy predictions. But then, yes, I am a teacher type, as much as I'm a coach counselor type, and I am. So cheerleader, and you can do this, but I'm also realistically aware that our destiny is powerful. So that's why my motto is guiding your future probabilities, destiny, and possibilities, which is free will, which is the free will is a feature of destiny, but the notion that you can just be, do, and have anything you want is just an ego trip. And there's a lot of that being sold out there. And I know that sounds a little dogmatic, and but it's better to, like, it's kind of this, like, there's all kinds of notions of the law of attraction, and it's all valid, and you are co-creating, but without a deeper understanding of, not that one needs to, but if one, often when I do readings, I'm my foundational perspective is to affirm, like I'm playing back to them what I should not know, and they're going nailed, 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 right? So what happens is they feel good about that. They feel, oh, I just totally need to hear that I'm doing the right thing and this is the good way. And here and there, and I'll go, well, I don't know if that's the best choice there. Your free will is interfering. And if you get off your destiny track by your free will too far, the cosmic 2x4 is going to come in. It's going to
whack you back.
It's going to kind of whack you. So it's a little tricky conversation. And I do appreciate, like, some people like Tony Robbins, for example, I call him he's like a Perseus, defying the gods. We're going to make it, and I appreciate that. I do, but it's tricky territory. I'm more to say, hey, rather than just my will be done, how about who are you, and
What are you here for?
what do you what's your role in this planet? Where are you as a soul in your journey, and all this kind of stuff? Yeah, so it gets psycho-spiritual very quickly. But I'm always trying to weave it into their practical expression, because, we all get up in the morning and do our life, and we have to food, clothing, shelter, right? So we have to, so that whole endeavor to keep it relevant. So yeah. And the one last thing is just, yes, I'm a teacher type. So I'm offering opportunity for them to intuitively understand what I'm saying by saying it with enough technicality without being too complex. That's my goal, right? So here's the technical, but this is what it means, and or could mean. That's the sort of the art of it, you could say, the art of writing a horoscope. It's I actually have an article on my website under Learn. You can go in the library, and there's lots of videos there. It goes to YouTube, by the way, and you would notice, oh my God, yeah, there's a lot of knowledge here, and among them is how and why horoscopes work, and that one is really worth a listen. I think because you go, oh my God, there's like people go, oh, the horoscopes, they don't really work. And they're kind of thinking they understand astrology. I'm an astrologer. It's like, you don't know. I'm thinking to myself, you have no idea what you're saying. I know that sounds strong, but I hear them kind of poo-pooing it. I'm thinking, okay, here we got a beginner here. He doesn't understand multidimensionality. Really, if you don't, I'll say this very quickly. Astrology is based on multidimensionality, and in the, you could call it the root dimension, or you can call it the highest dimension, however you want to look at it. That's where the blueprint code is. And that blueprint code, by the way, is sacred geometrical. So when we think of stars and planets and so forth and all the cosmos, and we tend to think energies, it's kind of like going, no, yeah, the moon and the sun have energy. It's true. The physics of the sun and the moon is very real. But the way astrology works isn't based on those energies like that. It's based on the archetypal blueprint that pervades everything. So it's a big leap to understand what that I just said, though. It's not an easy thing, but keep getting yeses. Okay, thanks, universe. My dinging phone there. I don't know if you're hearing that, but what I'm saying then is that if one were to go through that library that I have there, and you start to take your time and look at, you kind of go, I understand what he's saying now, because it's all kind of right there. Like I've said it in X amount of times and ways that the person would go, I understand. And it's invariably the word paradox comes to the fore, because you realize that the structure of everything in existence is by design, and the design is the blueprint or the archetypes. So the notion that the planets and the stars are emitting energy is a kind of physics. It's an exotericism. But the beauty of it is it's so intrinsic that then when you understand its intrinsicness, now you're in metaphysics, and you realize that it's like there's no, well, paradoxically, there isn't really a here and there. It's really just emerging, and that's how, when you understand, it's not an easy thing to understand what I'm saying. I think you might
I
imagine.
think that to me, what I'm getting is that everything is frequency, and everything has its own frequency. And if you think of it in terms of music, because music is just frequencies and they combine, they come together. If you listen to a symphony, each instrument, each note that's played combines, and then it separates, and then it recombines, and then it separates. And where you get the melody, you have things coming together in a certain pattern for a certain period of time. You've got measures, and it's constantly changing and evolving. It's never static. The notes are always the notes, and they vibrate on a certain frequency. A note is a frequency, but it's combinations of frequencies and how they interact together.
Absolutely beautiful. Yes. Yeah, indeed. The sound principle is the key to understanding sacred geometry, by the way. The sacred geometry is the key to understanding the archetypes. People think archetypes, king, queen, prince, or pauper, or, all these kind of personalities, which is fair enough. That's an outer expression, but in their core, it's very design shape based. It's like a blueprint of shape. The main thing I would add to that is it's all by design of intent. So the universal mind, the mind of God, basically, is very specifically intentional, and it works by logistical orders, which are dimensional. And so, yeah, that's when you understand that's simple. You understand that's where that word, the plan, summarizes the whole thing. The plan implies an intent, a purpose, and then you get into the laws, the principles, the science of the design. And that gets very exciting for me. And so, yeah, that's the ancients were right on to that nerve, right since the Egyptians go to the Atlanteans, the Chinese, the Indians, the Mesopotamians, they all got it clearly. They knew exactly what we're talking about. It was not lost on them. And that was what excited them immensely. But then, okay.
Period of time was that? What was before the Piscean Age? Because that's what we're talking about. To 2100
It
years
kind of
before.
like when you go to Egypt, for example, 5,000 BC, 4,500 BC, 65,000 100 years ago, etc. Yeah, we were in the age of Taurus. Taurus, which makes sense for the Egyptians. Egyptians themselves are kind of like a type of root race out of Africa, right? But arguably there was prior, like Atlantis. But Atlantis is kind of a different conversation in that they would have known these things, but theoretically, Atlantis or see what I mean by Atlantis, I mean the world, not Atlantis is not just a place, it's a time. We're talking now about a time. We can talk about Lemuria, or so these terms don't entirely do it justice because okay, but that theoretically they were in a higher dimension. We were, and then we fell, and it was in the falling that we like the astrology came forward. Interestingly enough, because they were more intuitive, they didn't need it, you might say. But well, anyway, there's many theories, and I don't really know. But the idea is that the astrology that we know, in as much as there was that Atlantean time on the planet, they would have known all about sacred geometry. They would have known all about that type of science. Definitely, right? But it had the devastation of something that occurred like 12,000 years ago. You probably heard this before. It's been said and again by many scholars that some big event, and basically it's understood by those that I tend to align with as there was a supernova, a star. It could, who knows in the grander schemes, but by a purely eventful thing that occurred and it created a devastation. Some have said more theoretically that, because of humanity having lost its way, kind of gone dark, it was, they had to wipe it out. And apparently that's happened more than once. So you get into this kind of not aliens so much as higher dimensional beings, right? So when we start talking about higher dimensional beings, it's not really like personalities who have big muscles. It's something else.
This is differently dimensional.
All part of the grand, like the God force, the God, whatever that is, right? I don't even want to say him. I don't even like calling it him at all. That there's nothing it doesn't know. There's nowhere it isn't. It's just always here everywhere. So there's nothing it doesn't know. And it's not like we on the planet are souls in a school. So it's all like not a big deal if it wipes out erases the chalkboard on a whole civilization. It's like, don't worry, you're eternal kind of thing. It's
like that God calls you back.
Yeah, or
it
comes
like
in and says, okay, it's become too messy. I don't know. These are theories, and who knows? Because again, the linear horizontal perspective is something caused this and that, but it's like I'm a more vertical perspective. I'm both, but more to the vertical. I'm like, yeah, no. There's a intention of mind that is behind it all, and the notion of random, this happened, no. You're it's gonna fizzle out like a shooting star, that kind of thinking. It's just gonna go nowhere. I mean, look at the design of nature, right? It's like come on, are we talking like, is this a conversation? We're arguing about this? That's right, that is by design. Look at like cells and atoms.
Everything is just like so perfectly combined.
Yeah,
Michael,
and yeah.
it has been so much fun chatting with you. And I can't believe that we've been on here for like an hour already.
I know we
I,
kind of
I
have to
want you to
we are
come back.
basing, and we have we haven't really gotten very far with our main focus, and I'm sorry about that. Is we'll have to do as part two.
Part 3 even.
Oh,
I just
sure.
love chatting with you.
Yeah,
So
let's do it.
what's the one thing that you want to leave the audience with from this section? And then we will have you back again for sure.
Okay. Yeah, this big picture contextual perspective we did is a bit of a mind bender. I like going there a lot, I have to admit. So we did, and there you go, everybody. But it is true that we can turn our attention to a very specific subject like the United States, and given what's going on in the United States, and it's kind of a tragic time at worst, and it's a very complicated time. But of course, there's that US election coming, and I don't like to get too political. At least I don't want to. I'm kind of nonpartisan for one, myself, and but also do my best to keep an open mind about, you know, uh, who's in charge, because I don't think that whoever's in charge is really entirely in charge, because there's too many powers that be that are on behind the scenes, right? That are just immensely wealthy, powerful, pivotal. And so a president is not that power. It's kind of a silly thought almost to me, but it's relevant enough, and it's kind of the way the game goes. And but above and beyond the election, though, but we can talk about that perhaps in part 3. I did have a few interesting insights, and again, it's kind of like a relatively impartial, like whether, this person or that person wins. Some people might not like that, but I'm like, just because it's too hot-headed for me, and I'm not interested in that too much, and it's too full of bias, right? Like
I'm
why?
very apolitical.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
just watch it and appreciate the theater for what it is.
There you go, and it gets too polarized, and it gets ugly, and it gets debased and so forth. I will say this, though, and I'll leave it on these final notes. The United States, of course, I don't know if you could, in a way, you can kind of say it's like an empire, but it's not. And it is, but it isn't. Okay. But I will say, in a sort of a global drama sense, I would say to people, remember, empire is always busy. Okay. Empire is not gone. There was the Persian Empire, there was Chinese dynasties and empires, there was the Roman Empire, right? There was the British Empire, and the United States emerged kind of in this sort of awkward way. It's so young, right? So there's this new kind of thing, because there's hidden influences in the United States, because it was a colony, et cetera, kind of deep state stuff and all that, right? But the main thing is empire is always on the march. That's just in terms of power politics.
Mhm.
And we've achieved the technology for that empire to have a global agenda now. That is the thing to think. If you want to get into the real power politics, I think you have to go there. And if you're like, it would be naive to assume that empire is not on the march. It is always on the march, and it will always, I think. And that's a very kind of interesting conversation. But so empire just, is a fairly, in astrology, Capricorn type of sign, meaning consolidate the power, right? And so now with modern technology, invariably globalism is here. So in that, the main point is that if in like a part two, talking about the United States is being context to that it's a nation, but the empire now is globalist. And that is where, in a manner of speaking, the United States is reeling, because it has kind of emerged in many ways as what's kind of recognized as the superpower. And then there's looking at China and, and Russia, right?
Russia.
Fair enough. Okay. But everybody kind of thinks, well, but the United States is the powerful one. But now it's getting hit and nailed, and it's kind of sad in a way, but in the larger, in many ways, of course, but in many respects, according to its particular destiny, I'm looking at it going, oh my God, it looks like, in short, the United States in this context is now challenged to very significantly reinvent itself somehow. That's what I was noticing. It's like this, and I don't believe, unfortunately, it's going to be a quick reinvention. It's going to take a while. Like, I don't know,
25 years.
Decades. Like, not, oh yeah, 25 years, that kind of thing. Yes. So I'll just leave it on that sort of note, because we get this big cosmological contextual perspective, and it does take time. I'm a bit long-winded about those things, I'm sorry. But to take one big closer step, it's the juxtaposition of the trends politically, and we might as well start with home. And even though Canada isn't the United States, we're very close
intricately connected.
Yes, exactly, precisely. Although there's a different kind of conversation there, but I won't go into that right now. Most importantly, the United States is a superpower and Canada isn't. That's the main thing to understand. And it was leaning kind of the American empire kind of notion, but no sooner that, but globalism the whole while was in effect undermining it and saying, you will not be an empire, you will be taught to yield and serve the empire. That is an interesting statement, eh?
That is very interesting. And we're going to leave it at that, Michael, but I want you to come back. Okay, we'll carry on.
Let's do it sooner than later. I'd like to. I've been doing some little studies. So thank you, Jill. And I appreciate our time today. Thank you. And I will invite people who are listening to, if you want to get more background, first go to my website, sunstarastrology.com, into the library. There's all kinds of stuff to learn. And there's a YouTube. I put my YouTube videos there, so it's easy to access. And of course, you can sign up for the free horoscope. But more importantly, get a reading and start that going on. Because, the empowerment that comes from a good reading can be quite mostly it's a remarkable thing how when it's done well, I'll leave on this on a more personal note. The affirmational approach that I take, I believe, aligns the person. A person comes in, their mental, emotional, spiritual, physical self almost is like achieves a kind of an alignment that it's very rare to get that. And once you get it, even if you knew everything that I said, it's the way it was said that gives it this whole other level, and I find it makes people kind of puts their feet on the ground and makes them feel good about who they are. That's what I'm mostly interested in, by the way, when it comes to my work, And it's amazing how I can see what they're doing. I can see it. I'm saying to you, I see it. It's showing me. And so I can tell them either, well, it's a go hard, or oops, it's going to come to a big turn, or oops, it's going to enter like undergo a transformation, and that's where it gets a bit difficult. But so we'll talk about this on a collective, larger empire, kind of national level, maybe next time in the United States.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another empowering episode of the You World Order Showcase podcast. We hope you've enjoyed hearing from our incredible life, health, and transformational coaches who are making a profound impact on the world. Remember, change begins with you, and you have the power to transform your life and the lives of others. If you want to take that next step and unlock your true potential, visit thecoachesalchemist.com, where you can find the 3 ways we can help you for free to spin your talent into gold with clarity, a system, and a plan. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an inspiring episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more people with our positive message. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and upcoming guest announcements. You can find us on Facebook at the U World Order or simply visit thecoachesalchemist.com.